Good evening and welcome to everyone joining. Hey, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. It's nice to see so many folks joining our information session for the Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal Replacement Project. We are excited that you're able to join us tonight and learn more about Washington State Ferry's plans to replace this important terminal. My name is Laura Labissener Miller, and I will be helping to facilitate and run tonight's meeting. We will hear from our project team about the concept that Ferries has chosen to move forward to replace this terminal. Coming to this decision would not have been possible without all of you and the input we've received from all three Triangle Route communities, our agency partners, local jurisdictions, tribes, and the hard work of our technical staff behind the scenes. Before we get started, I just want to note a few things about how to participate in this information session. We do have some time reserved at the end to answer questions. So you should see the question and answer box available to submit questions at any time throughout the presentation, and know that we will hold responding to those to the end. If you're calling in by phone and cannot access the Q&A feature, you will have access to raise your hand when we get to that point in the presentation, and we can ask you to ask your question aloud. So to raise your hand using your phone, you would dial *+9. We can add that into the chat so you have that handy as well. To help us manage the Q&A, we ask that those of you joining by computer, please do not use that raise the hand feature. We will only call on folks with their hands raised for that time. We'll read all other questions aloud for our project team to respond to. And we'll do our best to respond to all of the questions this evening, and many of them might be combined into one response when we get to that point. If you do have any technical difficulties at any point, please also use the Q&A to let us know if you need support. And then finally, to enable closed captioning, you can click on the CC button on the Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Okay, I think that's all of the fun logistics. So we will get into the agenda for this session. So this is a preview of what we'll be covering tonight. As a reminder, this information session will cover the same content as the online open house, which is still live. So if you'd like to follow along there or go back and reference anything that we talk about, we will put that link in the chat as well. We're going to start by providing a brief overview of the project, followed by a summary of the community engagement process and screening approach that led us to the decision for the concept to replace the terminal. We'll also share some details of the dock footprint that will be moving forward, and then we'll open up the floor to questions. So I think with that, Dave, if you'd like to kick us off with why Ferries is prioritizing this project.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Let's get started with the presentation. Again, my name is David Sowers. I've been the director of terminal engineering during this planning phase of the project. I want to give a little bit of a background on why we are replacing the terminal. For starters, the Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal in West Seattle serves over 2.3 million riders every year, and it's a critical point of the Triangle Route that links Fauntleroy, Southworth, and Vashon. The terminal was built in the early 1950s and needs significant work to continue to provide safe and reliable ferry service. Some of the terminal challenges include the aging and seismically vulnerable parts of the structure that are long overdue for replacement. We have, of course, the risk of rising sea levels, potentially damaging the terminal, including debris hitting underneath the dock and damaging utilities. We have ferry traffic backing up along Fauntleroy Way, and we only have one lane that then serves passengers bound for two destinations, Southworth and Vashon. And finally, the small dock has only the capacity to hold 84 cars, which serves a class of vessel that currently holds 124 cars. So obviously, there's a lot of processing that still happens while we're loading. So let's talk a little bit about the project timeline. In 2021, we started a planning study known as the Planning and Environmental Linkages, or PEL, to help identify potential transportation issues, environmental concerns, and community values that are important to the project and the project area. We're excited to share that we are reaching the end of this planning phase, and we have selected a concept for the new terminal. Since the project started, we've done several rounds of screening to refine and evaluate concepts for the new dock, or what we call project alternatives. Following the first 2 rounds of screening, we narrowed in on 2 main options, replacing the terminal at the existing location with either a similar size dock or replacing it with a larger size dock. Over the last couple of years, we refined a set to 6 detailed alternatives and have completed this 3rd round of screening to determine the actual dock footprint size to move forward into the NEPA process. During this process, we will consider things like traffic conditions, environmental considerations, ways to make the terminal safer and more efficient for everyone. That includes both passengers and our crew. We've also studied good to go and advanced ticketing as possible ways to improve operational efficiency. During the upcoming environmental review phase, which was this phase that we're going to be entering into, we will study how the footprint we've chosen interacts with the surrounding environment as well as with the surrounding community. Today, we'll walk through the process we use to determine which alternative to move forward into the environmental review. We will also continue to engage all 3 Triangle Route communities throughout the project. All right, so let's look at the alternatives we considered. So this is a snapshot of the alternatives that we looked at. Again, screening down from our original assessment that ranged from alternative A, which is a similar size to the current dock, to the largest alternative C, which holds a full 186 vehicles on the dock. And then alternative B were alternatives that kind of landed in the middle. And I'll explain the importance of the 186 vehicle criteria. Let's go to the next slide. So after listening to the community and our partners and evaluating these options, we landed on a mid-size layout based on the B alternatives, or as I like to call it, the Goldilocks version. This option improves operational efficiency and holds between 124 and 155 vehicles on the dock. This option is longer and has a narrower footprint and helps us avoid Cove Park. WSF will continue to refine the terminal design to minimize impacts to other environmentally sensitive areas. And Marcia will talk about that in a minute here. So later, we'll share more details about the screening process we used to get to this decision. But I want to turn it over to Marcia to walk us through the environment near the terminal. It's all yours, Marcia.
All right. Thanks, Dave. So my name is Marcia Tolan. I'm the Environmental and Permitting Program Lead at Washington State Ferries. And this slide gives you an overview of the environmentally sensitive area that surrounds the Fauntleroy terminal. Throughout the process, we considered important environmental resources and features, including the intertidal and nearshore habitats near the dock, which provide valuable habitat for salmon and other marine wildlife. There is no eelgrass or macroalgae in the area around the end of the current dock, where propeller wash from vessels creates a scour hole. There's Fauntleroy Creek, which flows under Fauntleroy Way southwest and then under the dock and into Puget Sound. Fauntleroy Creek provides the spawning habitat for coho salmon and coastal cutthroat trout. Cove Park, which offers public waterfront access directly next to the dock on the north side of the trestle there, and then Captain's Park, which is right at the intersection, which provides a public green space on the opposite side of Fauntleroy Way. We also considered how the project might improve the health of some of the environmental resources, such as by the removal of 430 creosote-treated timber piles that support the dock. These creosote is a known pollutant in water, and the density of the timber piles causes debris and driftwood to snag and collect under the dock. Now we'll move on to our approach to the Level 3 screening process. As Dave shared earlier, WSF developed 3 main concepts to replace the terminal. Alternatives A, A1, A2, and A3 would replace the terminal with a similar footprint to the existing terminal. Alternatives B, B1, B2, and B3 would replace the terminal with a long and narrow dock option that provides additional vehicle holding capacity. The footprint formed by alternatives B1 and B3 is what we are moving forward with. Alternative C is the longest and widest dock option and would provide the maximum amount of vehicle holding capacity. So I'll let Dave continue with an explanation about terminal features.
Hang on here. Let me get my audio going again. Sorry about that. All right. Thank you, Marcia. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the features that make up a typical ferry terminal. So all the concepts that we considered follow Washington State Ferry's terminal design manual. And a little bit of background on that. That's a document that we update every few years that kind of drives our decisions and the policy around how we preserve and improve our ferry terminals. It's not unlike the design manuals that our state highway counterparts use or the city of the Seattle or King County would use. So that's an important document that we follow. This involves replacing the dock in the same location and accommodating a total of 186 vehicles between the dock and Fauntleroy Way. 186 represents 1.5 times the capacity of the vessel class on this route. So you could do some math on the side. Meeting state and federal seismic design standards and accounting for sea level rise, providing enough space for large trucks to safely navigate the terminal. This will include wider and safer lanes for vehicles and dedicated lanes for people walking, rolling, biking, and driving motorcycles to the ferry, which, again, this is a deficiency we're trying to correct. We'll have more space for terminal operations. We'll, of course, have a new terminal building. We'll enhance the pickup and drop-off area for passengers with disabilities. We'll create a larger toll plaza with 2 toll booths for the traffic attendants and staff restroom. And finally, a minimal dock widening near the shoreline. So the diagram on this slide also shows the key elements of the ferry terminal, including the dolphins and the wing walls. These are terminal terms that we use interchangeably, and you might hear them tonight, that help align the vessels as they land into the berthing area. And then the trestle and the transfer span that supports the loading and unloading of the vehicle traffic. So with that little overview, I'm going to turn it over to John.
Thanks, David. So obviously a key part of this is community engagement. We've worked, as you see on the screen, I will read it because everyone hates having a PowerPoint read to them, but it shows the extensive outreach we've done in this project. It's something that WSF takes very seriously, as does all of WSDOT. You know, I've talked to people who are older than David and his predecessors, who they need the 3 Ds, design, display, defend. And we've moved on from that and just defending what we've already decided to working with the communities around the sound as we plan things like this. So we really appreciate not only those of you who are here tonight, but those of you who have been following along during the process and working with us. In the next slide, you see the propeller and the Pell study, all those 5 groups feeding into it. The executive advisory group, which is elected officials, I keep them apprised of milestones and information as we go forward, including this process, and ask them to do outreach to constituents, let us know if they have any questions. The technical advisory group, those who have special expertise, subject matter experts, and can advise us. Tribal input is, of course, vital to everything we do. We sit on the historical tribal lands throughout our system. And so making sure that as we move forward, we have the support and input from tribes is vital. Community advisory group, a lot of you, I think, who are here tonight have been part of that process. The folks who are willing to volunteer to do a deep dive. We're always very aware that those folks are volunteers and not getting paid, but you're the ones who are riding the boats and lining up along Fauntleroy Way or having people line up in front of your house. And so we need to understand. And then the same with community input that we need to, those who weren't involved in the deep dive, still using it, and we need to adjust. I will say with scheduling efforts we do here, and we make tweaks where we can based on customer comment. So what we heard in the next slide is all 3 communities. Southworth community members prefer a larger dock that prioritizes efficient loading and reliable service. Vashon residents support a larger dock that holds more vehicles, improves operational efficiency, and increases terminal access. And then Fauntleroy, the neighbors of the terminal, prefer a smaller sized dock that maintains the neighborhood character and minimizes impacts to Cove Park and the surrounding environment. This project's interesting because not only is it three distinct communities, but it's three distinct political entities, with Southworth being part of Kitsap County, and Vashon part of King County, and Fauntleroy part of King County, but also city of Seattle. So, we have done our best to hear folks and to hear what the input from all three communities. But obviously then, having heard that, we have to move on to a preferred alternative. So I'll turn it back, I think, to David to talk about the results of level 3 screening.
Well, thanks, John.
Oh, sorry, Marcia.
I wish I was as good looking as David, but yeah. So I'll continue on to share with you what the screening results are about. So this table shows how the project team evaluated each alternative during the screening process. You can see the dark green boxes represent the highest performance rating, while the light green indicates medium performance and white shows low performance. Some screening factors scored the same for all alternatives. And WSF, we focused on the two screening criteria categories that differ most between alternatives and are most critical to meeting the purpose and need, which is to develop a new terminal that meets operational needs while minimizing impacts to the surrounding environment and community as much as possible. We also heard from the advisory groups and partners about the importance of these key factors. So the table shows the screening results across those two categories. It shows screening criteria, which are general indicators of whether alternatives meet the project's purpose and need, and then performance factors that are specific indicators of how well alternatives meet each criterion. So in the next slide. So in summary, based on these results, we recommend moving forward with a terminal footprint based on alternatives B and B3, or the B alternatives, which are two of the longer dock options. This footprint improves operational efficiency and minimizes environmental impacts to Cove Park that's nearby, and it moves the ferry slip to deeper water, which also reduces propeller wash in the nearshore areas, allowing greater potential for restoring eelgrass and macroalgae around the dock. And this option then would hold between 124 and 155 vehicles, or at least one full Issaquah-class ferry. So here's how the A alternatives performed in the screening process. We found that the similar sized A dock options offer minimal benefit to operational efficiency. Even with good to go and wave to go advanced ticketing, the A alternatives also have greater impacts on the surrounding environment because they don't improve the scour hole at the end of the dock. Lastly, here's what the screening process revealed about Alternative C, which is the largest dock option. Alternative C brings the greatest increase in overwater coverage and impacts to eelgrass and macroalgae, and it requires the most complex permitting and mitigation. While a bigger dock may seem better, we found that the space to hold more than 124 to 155 vehicles does not improve operations. A dock that is large enough to hold a full ferry worth of vehicles saves the most time in loading and unloading. Anything extra, becomes difficult to manage. We will continue to refine the B alternative footprint to confirm how the dock size and holding capacity during the NEPA review process. So I'll pass this over to Charlie to wrap us up with an update on work that's happening soon.
Thank you, Marcia. Hello, everyone. I'm Charlie Torres. I'm the project manager for the terminal replacement project. Over the years, we've heard concerns about safety at the intersection of Fauntleroy Way and the terminal. We are working closely with the Seattle Department of Transportation to add a signal to the intersection. The signal will be designed and operated to balance the needs of neighborhood traffic, buses, and ferry traffic. We're designing and building the new traffic signal ahead of the larger terminal project to make it easier and safer for people to get to the terminal. Washington State Ferries plans to begin construction at the intersection later this year and wrap up work in the middle of next year.
Thanks, Charlie, and thanks to all of our presenters. We can actually, just stay on the slide for the time being. So that was, our presenters were quite efficient, and we are now going to just open it up to any questions that have started to come in here. David, this first.
Sorry, Lauren.
Jeff.
I was a little too efficient in mine, so I just want to bring up one other thing so everyone's on the same page. So, as everyone on this route knows, you've been on reduced two-boat service for several years, with a second bonus boat when it's available, and it's been available quite a lot, focused on keeping the two boats on schedule. We did not think we would have the crewing or vessel availability to restore service for another couple of years, but as you probably saw in the media last week, Governor Ferguson is very, very focused on improving our service. And so he has delayed the conversion of the next two Jumbo Mark II vessels. We have a 21 vessel fleet because we've been converting and plan to for the next several years one of the three largest vessels. Would that put us at a 20 vessel fleet, needing to do maintenance and preservation on those boats? It didn't give us enough to restore service. But because he's decided to delay the conversion of the next boat till after the World Cup, we expect this summer to have the crewing and the vessel availability for 18 boat service, which will allow us to restore the Triangle Route, Bremerton, and Port Townsend Coupeville. There's an important component of that, to just be very transparent, that we'll have 18 boats, but they have to be the right boats. So to run the three-boat schedule in the Triangle, we need to have 3 Issaquah-class vessels available, working very hard to make sure that we do. There may be times that we don't, in which at that point we would run the improved two-boat. While that's happening, we're also working on updating the two-boat schedule. So when we have to do that, we will have a third smaller boat with longer hours than we have now. So our goal and our hope is to restore you to pre-pandemic 3 Issaquah boat service as we enter the summer, the June 15th sailings, the summer sailings season. If we don't have that, occasionally you'll get a better two-boat schedule that we're currently doing public outreach on with the bonus boat for more hours. So, we know that we're doing all this as we are also thinking about this project and what that will mean from service. But I think going into the project, you're going to see much improved service, and it's certainly our focus in the governor's direction that we provide as much service as possible. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you, John. That's an important update, and I appreciate you jumping in. With that, we will go ahead and take a look at some of the questions that have been coming in so far. David, this first one is for you, related to the terminal design. Could you say a little bit about what people riding motorcycles and bicyclists could expect as they are using the new terminal? What will the lane configuration look like, and how can they kind of access the new terminal?
Yeah, I don't know if we could put a graphic up on the screen, but there's a couple things driving the design. And in addition to an initiative that the legislature passed called Complete Streets, there's also just the management of the terminal that's important for us with a multitude of different modes of travel. The new terminal, regardless of the size or length, will include a bicycle and motorcycle lane exclusively for them. This will help that traffic stage. It'll give them their own place to park and access in and out of that. As you know, motorcycles often just kind of cut right to the front of the line. They use the exit lanes to enter the terminal, and this will allow them to use the toll booths and stage in a established area. This will improve bicycle safety as well, because we'll have lanes also that they can use to offload and maintain some separation to the car. So I hope that kind of answers how the dock is going to look. I wish I had a graphic to put up for you, but rest assured there's some additional space on the new dock for those two vehicle types.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I didn't have that graphic handy at the moment, but appreciate that response. We also, while you were off mute, we have a few questions here about what construction looks like. And we are, as our timeline showed, a few years out from construction, but just kind of generally speaking, what are we expecting at this point about construction? Will the terminal close? How might schedules be impacted? And what other information could we share at this point about what people can expect during construction?
Well, I'll just start with saying that we're in a very early stages, having just sort of selected the size of the facility. The next real big step is to figure out the design and with that the construction staging. And as you're all aware, this is a very, very narrow terminal. There's not a lot of upland staging areas like we found when we did the Coleman Dock project or we did the Mukilteo ferry terminal replacement. So it's really a big constraint, and our contractors are going to have to work within a tight footprint and have a lot of barges and overwater operations to actually do the work. But until we've really fleshed out the actual final size of the dock, and we've started to have some conversations with our team about how it's going to be phased, I can't really provide, unfortunately, any specifics. I will say, if you look at how we manage Coleman Dock, and admittedly it's a much larger facility, we did provide vehicle and pedestrian and bicycle traffic around the clock for the duration of that contract, which lasted over 7 years. And we were able to stage things, and there was some, sometimes there might be a slip that closed in that case, but we always kept our operations going, and we always kept passengers separated from vehicles and provided a safe place for folks. So we have some experience doing this type of thing. Every terminal is different, and this one, of course, is really land constraint. So we're going to have to figure that out in the next phase.
David, I think in there also some questions around kind of what service might look like during construction, or if we know anything in terms of what service would look like, in particular the upcoming traffic light during construction as well.
Well, yeah, let me start with the first part of that question, then I'll hand it over to Charlie, because I think what's going to happen with construction later this year at the intersection, which is in this picture, is really important. As with the larger project and figuring out all this phasing, we're going to have to figure out how we can continue to provide service, or at least some measure or percentage of that service during construction. Again, this is an operation that runs 365 days a year. There's school children that come and go from Vashon Island. There's freight. There's emergency vehicles. There's regular commuters. There's tourists. I mean, there's just obviously the terminal needs to remain open, and we'll continue to do our best to provide, to John's point, the 3-boat service. There are concepts that would route service directly to downtown. There's talk about adding additional passenger-only ferry service, like we did this last year on the Bremerton route with Kitsap Transit. So there's going to be a whole bunch of conversations around what we can do to provide service, but we all understand, and I hope the community does as well, that you can't build these projects without having some impact. It's like remodeling your kitchen. There's just gonna be some meals that you just can't have a particular night, and we're gonna have to figure that out. And we'll continue to work closely with the community on what that looks like, and work with the ridership on that as well. But why don't I turn over to Charlie if you have some you want to comment on the question about construction of the intersection this year.
Charlie, you're on mute.
Okay. I mentioned earlier that when the intersection project is complete, we want to balance the neighborhood traffic. We want to balance our customers, and we also wanted to balance the bus usage. Well, the fourth important piece is the contractor needing to construct or replace the trestle. So those are 4 things we need to balance, and we haven't made a decision on what level of service we're going to have, but those are the 4 pieces I foresee trying to balance. And I don't think it's going to be one timing for the whole duration. I think we're going to be tweaking it from time to time as the project evolves. And then when it's finished, we'll go back and try and work with SDOT to come up with something that works well for, as I mentioned before, the neighborhood, the buses, as well as our customers. I'm not at a position now to tell you this is how the timing is going to be, but those are the things that are going to drive our decisions.
Thanks, Charlie. We do have that information there on the intersection. We'll continue to communicate about that as we learn more. Let's see here. We have a question about the reservation system, which, John, I'm wondering if you might be the best person to help answer that. Is the reservation system, like what is up in the San Juan Islands, something that was ever considered for this route? And could you say a little bit about how we think about the reservation system?
Yeah, we currently have reservations on 2 routes, the Anacortes San Juan Islands and then Port Townsend Coupeville. We have adapted them to fit each route. They're different, the levels of reserve space and how the reservations are released. The long-range plan talks about expanding the reservation system. Edmonds-Kingston is one of those key areas. What we found, and COVID definitely put us back, and we will pick up this conversation and see what routes it's applicable for. On routes like for the San Juan Islands, it works well. Port Townsend, Coupeville, where people are planning their travel. What we've heard from planners is that most people could probably use a reservation system going to work. You go to work about the same time, but because you would be using it every day, Monday through Friday, if you have a doctor's appointment, if you have a sick child, if you, your boss asks you to stay late, it's much less predictable when you would be going home. And so using a reservation system becomes less manageable. We're not at all opposed to expanding the reservation system. It's just something at the moment we don't have the capacity to do. If the folks on Vashon Southworth wanted to talk about that. The other thing is that for staging, Fauntleroy, if you think about it, if you've gone to San Juan Islands, there's a big parking lot there because they're staging going to 4 different islands. Along Fauntleroy Way, staging for reservations, knowing which cars were going to Vashon and which to Southworth would be challenging. There's no holding there. And, everyone who's worked on the schedule rewrite there a few years ago knows that, part of the problem is pulling cars out if you have a multi-destination route to get them in, or if you have one sailing to Vashon and you've loaded your last Vashon, then you've got 30 cars going to Southworth because you've pulled everyone out, it becomes challenging. So we're not philosophically opposed to it. I just think there are real challenges to doing it on a route like the Triangle.
Yeah, thank you, John. That's really helpful. David, this next one is about considering a second slip for this terminal. Is that something the team looked at as part of this effort, or something that might be considered in the future?
Yeah, it's certainly something that we could consider in the future. It's not in the scope of the current work. There's additional slips planned at Southworth. Of course, we have multiple slips at Vashon, and those are where our typical mornings begin on the peninsula or on the island. It would be helpful. I know our crews have expressed interest in seeing a second slip, but it's not funded, and that's the hang up right now. We will likely put in a temporary second slip during construction, because in order to maintain service and take out the old slip, we're going to have some other way to load and unload vehicles. So there will be that, but I would love to get it permitted. I would love to have the funding for it, but we don't have that right now. What I can assure you is that we won't preclude the option to add it in at a later date. And we have done that in the past in other terminals. Mukilteo, for example, is one where we have the capacity to add a second slip when the need arises, when the financing arises, that we could add it in, Laura.
Thank you, David. So it's not completely off the table, but something that would be looked at in the future if more funding is identified. Yeah. This next one is we're thinking about how people are walking to the terminal. we know that there is Vashon kids going to Vashon schools who are walking on most weekdays. And so just thinking about how the new terminal might, people walking might be able to access that. David, could you say a little bit about, maybe Charlie as well, about kind of what that experience will look like in terms of space for people who are walking on? Will there be any additional space? Is that something we know at this stage?
Yeah, I can take a crack at this, unless you want to answer the question, Charlie.
You go first.
All right. Okay. Well, so as I answered the question regarding bicyclists and motorcycles, there are design criteria which we need to closely adhere to, and pay particularly close attention to folks walking or ADA folks that are in a wheelchair or some other mode. So we are widening the sidewalk that exists along the south side of the dock. It can be congested. The dock will be a little bit longer than what it's out there today. And Charlie assures me that we're going to have some resting areas along the way for folks that need to take a break on that walk. So we are trying to accommodate better with the new design folks that are walking on, as well as when you get to the end of the dock, the ability to stage more safely and load and unload. What the project doesn't include is a pedestrian overhead walkway like we have in Seattle or like we have in Edmonds or in Anacortes, where we actually physically separate the folks from the vehicles as they, as they're getting towards the end of the dock. We won't have that as part of this project. Like the second slip question, though, it could be something we could add later. Our designs will not preclude that addition should the funding present itself at some point. And again, it's definitely a time savings to get the folks that are walking on separate from vehicles. So I don't know, Charlie, anything else you want to add?
I was thinking about during the chapter where we're constructing or replacing the trestle at the terminal, and we have pedestrians and bicyclists coming and going with some limited service. And what comes to mind is what we did over on the Vashon side several years ago, when we replaced 210 feet of that trestle and we added those seismic braces to the side of it. We were well aware that a lot of children were coming in the morning, 6:30 or so, and we were just trying to figure out how do we keep them safe? How do we keep them separated from the contractors' dangerous equipment? I think we'd go through the same exercise once we figured out what it's going to look like with the contractor trying to replace this trestle, and ensure that it's as safe as we can make it for those passengers during the construction season. Okay. Don't know if that helps.
Thanks, Charlie. We have a couple more questions about how motorcycles would access the terminal. David, will the terminal design or through this project be considering any changes to the priority loading that is currently in place system-wide? And in particular, will motorcycles need to wait in line with cars to get through the toll booth?
Yeah, so I think there's some things that we're going to have to sort out with respect to motorcycles. We are not going to continue to operate like the way we do now, where motorcycles go down the exit lanes. That movement is not going to happen. We're going to process them through the toll booths. Now, how that happens, it's not real clear to me exactly how they prioritize the motorcycles, but they are going to have their own staging area on the north side of the dock and their own lane, and they're going to be queued separately from the vehicles. So I think more to come on that. We don't have anybody from the operations team on the call tonight. They could probably answer that question better, but we're definitely going to manage motorcycles a little bit differently than we have in the past. And that's for everybody's safety.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. That's an important point. Let's see. I guess we're on the topic of toll booths. We have a question here about the toll booth area, and in particular, will the new terminal have a larger space, larger area for toll booths to accommodate larger vehicles such as trucks?
Yeah, Charlie, you want to answer that one, or would you like Mark to weigh in?
Mark, are you familiar with that? I'm willing to give it a crack. I'll start. Maybe Mark, you can fill in any blanks. Yes, we're gonna have two terminals are going to be positioned differently than they are today. We want to, the reason they're going to be pushed further offshore, I don't know if it's 10 or 20 feet further offshore from where they are today, is just so that we have those correct movements for the trucks to make it through safely without interfering with the toll booths. Mark?
Yeah, just the finer point on what you just said, Charlie, was like the main accommodation design from a design perspective is so that they can come down from, obviously they approach from the north, and it's the sweeping turn onto the terminal and into the toll booths. It's basically that turn radius that you need to design for. So that's where Charlie was just speaking about them being a little further from the intersection helps accommodate the large trucks that are going there today. So they don't have to swing into an oncoming lane to do that. And sorry, while I was going here, I failed to introduce myself. Hi everyone, I'm Mark Bandy. I'm a consultant supporting the project.
Thanks, Mark. I don't think we can get through a public meeting without asking Mark to come on and help answer some questions. So thank you. I think the last question I see in here is related to, if we could pull up the slide with the environmental, kind of the environment surrounding the terminal. And Marcia, this one is for you. So we've kind of called out some of the key environmental features there. I realize it is a bit difficult to read that really light text on the screen, but one of the things that is noted there is Captain's Park, which is a park across the street from the terminal. Marcia, is, their question here is just if this project, if we're considering or thinking about that park as we're designing the terminal, could you say a little bit about how we are considering all of the parks and in particular Captain's Park?
Sure, Laura. Well, both federal and state laws require us to look at properties like parks and open spaces, recreation sites, whether they belong to us or not, is part of our environmental review. Even Cove Park, which is adjacent to the north of the terminal, is not owned by WSF. And so whether it's owned by us or not, we still have to consider how our project may impact it directly or indirectly if we're changing any functions of those properties. And one example, Cove Park is an elevated site, and we would be considering how the views are from that park. So it's all part of the analysis where we need to acknowledge whether there are impacts that are direct or indirect as part of that process. I hope that helps respond to your question.
Yes, definitely. Hearing that it's important and also required for ferries to consider how this project might affect parks. And I know this team has done a lot of work in listening to all of the communities to really minimize impacts to parks as much as we can. Those are all of the questions I am currently seeing. We do have one final slide here kind of outlining some next steps, and we'll just give folks a minute or two to see if there are any lingering questions as we pull up that final slide. Seeing any so far. Charlie, do you want to kind of walk us through what we can expect next for this project?
Okay, our next steps. Here we go. We're wrapping up the Pell report later this year, I think mid-year, and we will continue tribal and agency coordination throughout the process before we move into the environmental review, or NEPA and SEPA. Once we complete environmental review, we will design and start building the project. At this time, the state legislature has authorized $94 million towards this project, and Washington State Ferries will continue seeking more state and federal funds needed to build the full project. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Laura. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you to everyone who joined us this evening. I just want to remind you again before we leave that our online open house is still live. So please do feel free to visit the online open house. I will also drop the link to our our email inbox, or you can reach us anytime if you have any questions about the project. Charlie, I see we just got one follow-up question on funding, just a question asking how much of this project will require federal funds, if that's something we know at this stage yet.
I don't know how much of the project will require federal funds. Typically how these projects go through, as the project develops and we see how much funding we're short, we explore our alternatives. Do they come from the state? Do we go after federal grants? Well, we're still not there.
Thanks, Charlie. So we consider a range of funding sources, including potentially federal funds. Okay. I think with that, we will go ahead and wrap up this information session. Again, thank you to everyone for joining. Thank you to all of our presenters. And we really appreciate your time and learning about this project. Any final words, Dave?
Yeah, no, thank you everyone for taking time out this evening and joining us. We're excited about the project, and we hope everybody here is interested and also excited about it. So thank you all for participating, and thanks all the panelists. Rainier, enjoy your evening.
Night, everyone.
Good night.